today.
No, this is Kabbalah, the movies tonight.
Okay, great. So good afternoon. My name is Melanie Grunwald. I'm the Executive Director at Kabbalah Experience. We're based in Denver, Colorado, and we have students and faculty from around the country and around the world. So it's lovely to have you here. And if you don't mind just introducing yourself, who are you, where are you, and how did you end up here? So Louise, why don't you start us off?
Okay. My name's Louise Oram. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. And it was an invitation through Jewish Learning.
Great.
It sounded interesting, but like today, I'll probably be just listening, finding out what you guys are about. Any texts that you guys refer to, I'd appreciate knowing about. I'm not huge in knowledge on Kabbalah, but I do read a little bit of the Zohar on Shabbat, and I took a course from Hebrew College that included that, and so there's a little familiarity with it.
Great, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mona. Hi.
Oh, hi, this is my day off from babysitting. I was always interested in Kabbalah, and I go to courses from Jewish Learning Institute at Chabad.
Okay.
And I'm trying to get them to do a Kabbalah course, but you're here now, so thank you.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
How's the baby?
Oh, she'll be a year old next week.
Oh, sweet.
Yelling.
Very nice. Good. Joan, would you like to introduce yourself?
This is my first time coming, and I just got back from a beach walk, so my hair's a little flat. But anyway, I'm in Marblehead, Massachusetts, and I found out through my Jewish learning, and I'm a big believer in Kabbalah. I've been Kabbalah. I just feel like there's, especially right now, we really need to have as much energy, for ourselves and for Israel. So I'm just really appreciative to be here.
Great, welcome. It's lovely to have you here. Cecile. Hi.
Hi, so I live in Florida, in Coral Springs, and I heard about the Kabbalah from my Jewish Learning as well, through Facebook. Somebody sent me a link. My daughter, actually, she sent me a link. And I've been wanting to take Kabbalah courses for quite a while, just never got around to it. There aren't many places where you can find courses like that in town. And online, I think, is the best, and I'm looking forward to the lessons.
Great, welcome. Stephen.
Hi, I'm Stephen. I'm a graduate student in math, and I actually found out about this group through I guess ultimately Facebook, and my grad school is in Philadelphia, but I'm currently in Georgia with family.
Great, thank you. It's good to see you. Trudy, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Trudy Leibowitz. I live in Littleton, Colorado. A friend of mine introduced me to the class about a month ago. And I'm not sure if Tommy's even here today or not. And I've enjoyed it tremendously. It's just opened up a whole new world for me.
Great, good to see you.
Thank you.
Marianne.
Hi, my name is Marianne. I'm joining you from Miami, Florida. This is my first time, and I recently took a JLI class on death and dying. It wasn't called that, but that's what it was about. Maybe that's why I got the Facebook message. But I do things with Chabad, and it sounds interesting, so here I am to give it a try.
Great, welcome. It's great to have you here. Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa Buchanan. I'm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I don't know how I found out about you. I want to say I got an email from my Jewish Learning. I don't know.
That's
so happy to be here, though.
Great. I'm so glad you're back. Thank you. Good to see you. Rabbi Buzz.
Hello. How are you, Melanie?
Good. How are you?
Very nice to see a wonderful group.
Yeah.
Ready to be excited by a prompt from you.
Would you introduce yourself?
Me, I'm Buzz Vogage. I've served as a rabbi for 60 years, and the pandemic caused me to be serving again over Zoom, and I picked up a congregation from here to New Zealand. I retired many years ago. I'm very old, and I am dabbling in studies and being excited by younger scholars.
Great. I'm glad you made it. It's always good to see you. Tommy, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Tommy, and I'm from Aurora, Colorado. I started studying about a half a year with Melanie, and I really enjoy it very much and continue doing it as well.
Right. Thank you. Good to see you. Daphne? Did I say your name right?
Yeah, Daphne or
Yeah.
Daphne.
Daphne. You tell me what do you
Um,
prefer to be called?
Daphne.
Daphne. Okay, great. Thanks. And introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm in Southern California, and saw this and I was so excited. I have not learned anything about this since I was in college in the 90s. So I wanted to come back.
Welcome. Where in SoCal are you?
Mission Viejo in South
Nice.
Orange County.
Uh-huh. My in-laws are in Walnut and West Covina, that area.
Oh yeah.
Great.
Yeah, my aunt's near there.
Nice to see you. And Corinne, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Corinne from Mauritius. I learned from you from my Jewish learning, and I was interested in Judaism and mysticism, and learned a bit more from other platforms about Kabbalah and find it very interesting. Thank you.
Welcome. And you said you're from Mauritius?
Yes.
Where's that?
Sorry?
Where is that?
It's in the Indian Ocean. It's off the coast of Africa. There is South Africa, Madagascar. It's an island close to a French island in the Indian Ocean, a small, tiny island.
Wow. Well, welcome. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you. Here is midnight, past midnight.
Wow. It's always good to burn the midnight oil and do some learning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. So this past week, and for those of you that weren't on at the beginning, my name is Melanie Gruenwald. I'm the executive director at Kabbalah Experience. We're based in Denver, Colorado, and we're a progressive center for adult spiritual education. We really seek to build community. We talk about transformative Kabbalah, using Kabbalah as part of our toolbox, right, for personal transformation and living with greater awareness of ourselves and of our connections to the people and the universe around us. So it's really great to have you here from literally all over the world, from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. It's just lovely. So welcome, welcome. So this past week, we celebrated the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, which celebrates the end of the 49 days between, there's 49 days of traveling between Passover and Shavuot, moving from slavery in Egypt to the receiving of the Torah at day 50 on Mount Sinai. And something that's been in my head that I'd love to discuss with you is, at what point really do we experience freedom? Right? Did the Israelites, when they left Egypt, experience freedom when they actually physically left slavery? Did they experience freedom when they were on the journey? Or did we experience freedom at receiving the Torah? Or is it just a continuous path of removing ourselves from the things that we're enslaved to? So I'm wondering if you've had a chance, if that's occurred to you, if you've thought about that at all. What does freedom mean? At what point do we experience freedom on this kind of journey? And anyone could feel free to jump in.
Not all at once.
Well, I feel like it's when we feel like we're free to live and express ourselves the way we want to without any fear of repercussions.
Right. Part of the discussion we often have at our Passover Seder is what do you want to be free from this year, right? There are so many things that we're bound to. What do we want freedom from or freedom to do, right? So you're saying freedom to express ourselves for who we are.
And live the way we want. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mm.
Teresa, did you have your hand up?
I can only speak for myself, but for me, freedom was when I was able to, it has to do with attachment. Attachment to people, places, things, ideas, my idea of who I am, all those for them, the attachment to Egypt and the way of life they had there, you know. So when we are able to detach, if you will, and I know that's a tricky word for me anyway, that's when freedom comes. So I think it's an internal, personal thing. We can choose freedom.
Right. And what point do we become detached from our slave narrative?
And they never control us when they don't control us.
Rick and Michelle, welcome to the room.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here. Where are you based? Where are you from?
Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus. And Michelle, where are you?
I'm from Orlando, Florida.
Great. Welcome. We have Mona's in Orlando too, right?
Yes.
And
My
Tommy.
daughter lives there.
Yeah, and Tommy's daughter and grandkids is there. Right. So we're thinking about this idea of a journey of freedom, right? What do we experience freedom from? In Kabbalah, we talk a lot about our personal narrative, right? Anything we experience in life is neither innately good or bad, right? And we talked about this a little bit last night in our self-study conversation, right? Death is neither innately good or bad, right? It's just part of the human experience. Everybody we know is going to die before us or die after us, right? It's just a given, and it's part of living. It's part of the human experience, right? Love, grief, pain, joy, right? That's all part of the human experience. But the things that show up for us, right? Whether it's a change, a journey through the desert, a change that's forced on us versus a change that we choose. None of that is innately good or bad, right? Sometimes we just have to hold things in the vessel and recognize them for what they are, right? It's like looking at a bowl of stew, right? Or a bowl of soup. You're like, that's kind of interesting, right? We can approach this experience, something that's new or different to us, from a place of curiosity. Oh, there's carrots in there. There's corn in there, right? There's something in there I don't really recognize. And it doesn't make it bad or good, right? There's not a judgment with it. It's just, what are we going to do with it? Right? If it's hot and I spill it on my lap, that could be painful, right? If it's cool enough to taste and it's delicious and wonderful and, wholesome and filling, like that's another experience of that. But that stew, right? The stew of life, the stew of things that show up for us on a day-to-day basis are neither good or bad. And what that means, right? And that's also kind of going back to what Joan was saying, was this idea that we can choose how we respond to what's showing up for us. Right? A divorce, a new pet, right? A new child. Job loss, retirement. All those things that show up in life for us may be expected or unexpected. And then we have a choice of how do we create the narrative around them? How do we create the story for what's showing up for us? Rick, what's coming up for you?
Well, I don't know. We're going to be moving, and so it's going to be a big deal in our lives. And the choice is, instead of moving south to where it's going to be warm, we're going to be moving where it's going to be much colder. And so I have to kind of wrap my head around that experience. Completely different from what I thought was going to happen. And so I guess it's just how, when you look at freedom, and it's always a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and I think the one lady said you can choose or not choose. But I think it's deeper than that. I think it places into a deeper realm other than just choosing. We have to really look at it. And this word comes in doubts, or this comes in I'm afraid, or whatever, all of that emotions come in. I'm happy with this, or, we really have to sit and look at the root thing with that and find out what the freedom is from. And I think that's the choice. I think the choice is exactly, I think what you're saying to me anyway, is that you must look at everything as something that you have to choose to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. And sometimes things aren't a choice, right? Things are chosen for us, maybe before we're ready. But when, you talk about like moving up north, the question of, is it a freedom from or freedom to, right? That it is a place of privilege to, in the sense that I have a choice about where I'm going to live at this time in my life, right? And
Right.
if I'm downsizing or upsizing, right, that's also a choice. And that might give freedom from or freedom to, right, do other things in our lives.
Well, does that also, things that happen to us outside of our control is still that choice of freedom? Is that
Well,
from that, or is that just accepting for what it is?
I think it could be both and. I mean, if
It
we
can
think
both.
about the tree of life and we study the spherot, right, so that I don't have the diagram in front of me right now. I might have it in my notebook. Hold on one sec. Yes. Okay. So here's a nice little diagram that I drew. So these bottom two spherot, I don't know if you can read my writing. On
Yeah,
the left,
I can.
the right is Netzach, and the left is Hod, right? So Netzach really focuses on resilience and overcoming obstacles, right? It's about persevering, pushing through. That's kind of saying, how am I going to solve this problem, right? How am I going to keep working towards a goal, even when I'm tired or hungry or don't feel like doing whatever it is that I need to do? And then the Hod is the giving way, right? That's the humility and the acceptance. And that's where we recognize I'm really not in control, right? So it could be, just because you talked about moving, it's on my mind, right? The idea that I sold my house, I put an offer on another house, everything's going great, but then, so I've totally got it going, right? I'm on track, I'm in control, but then an offer falls through, right? Or you find out something is funky in the inspection and you have to deal with it, right? Like the Hod is kind of saying, all right, I'm not really totally in control. In the greater world, I'm this big in the scheme of the infinite universe. Right?
Okay,
So go
does
ahead.
that point back, I'm sorry to interrupt, but does that point back to a concept of where a higher power is the one that is directing us, so to speak, or I don't want to say controlling, but interfering?
Yeah, I mean, it is saying like that left side of the tree of life comes down from the, we say that Keter, right, which is on the top of the tree of life, is kind of our superconscious. And there's three jewels in the crown of Keter. And the one on the left that comes down to Hod, to that place of acceptance and humility, is about will, right? It's about recognizing there might be a will that's greater than ours. Something I talk about a lot in class is, we're not always on the path we imagined we'd be on, but we're on the path that we need to be at this moment.
Okay.
And for me, what keeps coming up is this idea that we're always on a journey, right? Reaching Sinai wasn't the destination. Now we're going to try to get to the Holy Land, but we're never going to make it to the Holy Land, right? This generation doesn't make it into Israel in the biblical narrative.
Right.
So it's not about the destination. It's about where are we on the journey and how are we choosing to take the next step on that journey? Daphne? Thank you. Yeah.
Can I offer perhaps an example that kind of might encompass all of this?
Sure.
From a life experience that I had?
Please.
Okay. Thank you. This is very interesting. It all just kind of came together. Thank you for this. Okay. I'm a kidnapping survivor. I was 18. I was at college. I was taken from my dorm. And it was a nightmare. I got out of it. It was a very unusual set of circumstances that my only explanation is divine intervention, the way things lined up for me to escape. So I had to I was provided a path out. But when I was in the situation and even in the immediate aftermath dealing with that hell, I did have the freedom within my mind that no one could touch. You know, I grew up reading Anne Frank, and that would come to mind a lot when I was in that situation, thinking I have control, I have the freedom of my brain and what goes on in my brain. And I don't have to be captive in my brain. Just continue with my freedom inside my head until I do have the opportunity to get out. And a higher power did give me the opportunities to get out. So there's several layers of freedom in there that I feel, and kind of I always said that was kind of like me escaping my personal Egypt. And I went on to a career in Holocaust restitution. That was kind of my payback. So I'm like, rawr. But anyway, I don't know if that, I don't mean to be a downer, but I don't know if that kind of explained anything or kind of made a good example of how the freedom works on so many different levels and how we can choose what to do with that. I had the choice to give up in my brain, and I chose not to.
And Daphne, have you ever watched the movie Hurricane?
Is that with Denzel Washington?
Yeah.
We had to watch, we were watching that in one of our little classes, and there's this line in there about how Reuben Carter, at one point when he was stuck in prison, that he was not really living in the cell, but he was living more in his mind or in his spirit, that was, he was sort of finding some freedom there, rather than the actual circumstances of what was happening.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, praise God that you ultimately got out of that awful situation.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, there really is a lot of connection between what you've shared about your story and what we read from Holocaust survivors.
I was just going to say, I've witnessed over 300 Holocaust survivor testimonies. And and everyone has always said I was the best person for that job. And survivors knew. It was weird. One time I was just asking this survivor some questions, and he looks at me and he goes, "You've had your own hell, haven't you?" I'm like, "Whoa, does it show?" And he's like, "Yep." He goes, "Oh, not to everyone else. It does to us." I'm like, "Oh." Apparently it was the questions I was asking. He's like, "You don't ask that question unless you've been victimized, lady." Like, oh.
Interesting, right? And you never would have found the path if you didn't have that experience.
But I learned some incredible survival life skills from them, and actually I had some concentration camp therapy, concentration camp syndrome therapy that helped a lot. So.
Thank you. Right, and nobody ever looks for suffering in their life, right? But we all live through it in our different ways, right? I'm sure 16 of us in this room at this moment, right, all have our own stories. All different, right? Can't be compared, but all different. And there's something, right, that keeps us going, that keeps us surviving, that keeps us showing up and asking these questions, right? The fact that you're here, I know you haven't opted out of life, but you're choosing to lean into it. You're choosing to engage and to ask the questions and to struggle. My son had cancer, and my mom said, "How could you believe in a God that gives your son cancer?" I said, "Well, I might be angry at God, but I'm still arguing with him, right?" Like, we could still have those questions. It doesn't mean for me, right, it wasn't about flipping the switch. That we make those conscious choices. Tommy, were you raising your hand?
No.
Thinking about it, do we sometimes ask people to be free from pain?
How can we?
We did, It's very hard decisions, but people that suffer so much, and it's a very sad statement, but sometimes we don't want people suffering anymore.
Yeah. Right. And that's a
It's a
choice.
different way of looking at it, very different.
Right. And that's also where we flow, right? When we talk about the tree of life, we talk about it as an energy flow, right? Even though I'm drawing it in circles, they're contained in these physical circles. It's energy, right? It's messy. It's not linear. It comes and it goes. You go up, down, diagonal, right? And something that we talk about a lot is that balance again between Hod and Yesod. I'm sorry, between Netzach and Hod, right? Netzach of perseverance and the Hod of giving way and acceptance and humility, right? The Netzach of I can control this, and the Hod of saying, you know, I just have to be still and see what's swirling around me at this moment. You know, it's like
It's the
being
serenity. It's the serenity prayer, the serenity to accept what you can't change, and the courage to change what you can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
exactly right. And where, you know, I think about it from my days when I used to spend time at the beach. We don't have beaches in Colorado, but the idea of, you know, when you hit an undertow, you don't want to swim against it, right? That's when you're gonna get tired and drown, right? When you go with the flow, sometimes when you give way, right? That's when you can have that serenity, right? When you say, I don't have to keep fighting. I can go with the flow in this and see what's showing up for me. What else is coming up for you?
Something that if you don't mind, we feel freedom in different times, in different points in our life differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always, sometimes we really feel free and sometimes we feel really something holding to us and it's harder. So it's not a even journey. The journey
Yeah.
has a lot of ups and downs.
Right. And it's not always, sometimes it's a choice, right? They say, I believe there's a midrash that says, a teaching that says 80% of the Israelites actually chose to stay in slavery. Only 20% left, right? Because to know, you know, the devil we know is better than the devil we don't know. So choosing to leave is also a choice, and choosing to stay is also a choice. You know, when we talk about relationships or friendships, right, that aren't serving you, right? Like the idea of saying, this is not working in my life is a choice versus acceptance of relationships that might be hurtful or abusive. Did you want to add to that, John?
I always approach things philosophically. So freedom has to do with, you're talking about transformative behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's a process that comes along by virtue of achieving personally the steps of transformative behavior that you think you can see it being achieved in yourself. You set a goal for some form of transformation. And throughout your dimensions of Kabbalah, we're trying to achieve these things from within. And to me, I have to see it in the bigger sense. Freedom is achieving a step. Whether, no matter what it does, what effect it has on us personally in the design of our personal lives. I don't know if I'm coming through on anything or not, but because I don't see this the little frame around me. I see it around you, Melanie.
I think something's also not aligned with your volume, your sound at this point.
My
But I
sound,
think,
my sound is not working.
well, your mouth and your sound aren't.
Oh,
in
I
sync.
see. Sequence. Yeah, there's always some kind of a delay beyond my power and even the higher power.
Right. And you should still choose to show up. Right. So, right. We talk about transformative Kabbalah, right? As you're talking about transformative behavior.
Yeah.
That we're always on a journey, right? I don't know. Right. And this is kind of what I'm struggling with and why I love having these conversations, right? I don't necessarily believe that there's a place of freedom. I think we might have freedom to, right? Freedom to do X, Y, and Z. but I don't know that we have freedom from, right? If you've experienced trauma or cancer or grief, right? That all these things in our lives like are always going to be present, thanks. And always going to bubble up, right? In different places. See you later. Thank you. We're actually in our office today. It's so nice. Right. What is freedom from?
That's
I think that freedom from is choosing to be free of suffering. To make a conscious choice that whatever situation you're in or being confronted, that you can make a choice to not suffer over it as you are navigating it. And because in my experience, the more that I would worry about something, analyze it, and work on it from an anxious point of view, where I felt that the circumstance was also a threat, escalated how I dealt with it in not a good way. So as I trained myself to de-escalate my sense of something being a threat to me and just dealt with what was in front of me and tried to focus more on the moment and not bring in what was past and not try to control the future, then it de-escalated the sense of threat about that situation and decreased my suffering over it. And it led to feeling more empowered.
Nice.
And so.
Yeah, I mean, in our spring semester, and I'll come right back to you, Marianne. In the spring semester, we teach this time class, and one of the sections is on the past, right? Is there a statute of limitations on the past? Nobody would say after a week, oh, it's time to get over your trauma. It's a time to get over your grief. After a month, after a year, after 3 years, after 5 years, right? Like it just becomes part of our fabric. Part of our story will always be part of who we are, but we don't have to be defined or limited by it, right? Like the same way we hold an experience, and we could say, that might have been not a great moment in my life, right? Like we can acknowledge there's challenges, right? But we can choose what we do with it, right? And even the example that Daphne gave, right, of this experience helped me become an advocate and an interviewer for Holocaust survivors. So we don't know we're going to end up on a certain path until we end up on that path. Marianne?
Just building on what Michelle and you said, you can't choose what's happening around you necessarily. You can't choose the circumstances always. You can't choose what other people do, but you can choose how you respond to it and how you process it and how you react to it. And by doing that, by responding a particular way, you're sort of putting your own spin on the whole experience and shaping your own experience. And that you have the freedom to do.
Yeah. I mean, even something as mundane as like my kid dropping a glass in the kitchen, right? I could be like, freak out at him, or I could be like, okay, it's just a thing, right? Like it's an object, let's clean it up. Nobody's hurt. Let's move on, right? And then the way that we react, almost becomes contagious to the people around us, right? If we have heightened anxiety, the people around us are going to have heightened anxiety. If we exude calm, the people around us are going to be more calm, right? It's like in the state of an emergency, that if we're, doing our deep breathing and doing what we need to do rather than panicking, then the other people around us will be able to fall into line as well. I read something about that in my Brene Brown book. I don't know if anyone else has read Brene Brown, but she also talks about that, like the energy you manifest becomes the energy you manifest around you. And that's a choice, right? We can choose. And sometimes we definitely don't feel like we have a choice. But there are definitely times that we feel stuck or broken. But time helps with that too. And I think, what Michelle said again about that, that's also when we talk about we can acknowledge our past, but we don't have to be defined or limited by it. Right.
I think you can, I mean, the way your past sort of stays with you is how much of it you bring into your present, and being able to allow yourself to take from it what is useful in the moment, and allow what has no purpose or value to sort of be in the museum of your life, you know, but you don't have to live in the museum of your life. And bringing that along, I think that most people experience trauma, certainly not to the level, for example, that Daphne was sharing with us, but, you know, other of us. I used to work in the area of sexual assault, you know, and so you see that trauma stays with people for quite a long time. I was in the military, so I had an experience around dealing with people with PTSD. But at some point, you begin to try to put those experiences in a place and kind of house them, and then take from them what you can and move on into your present life.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Go ahead, Cecile. Yep, you have to unmute.
So basically, if you take control of your life, that's where your freedom comes from. Freedom is within. Yes, there are a lot of things that go on in life, like the war and a lot of other things that happen in life, but it's how you deal with it, how you can cope with it, the control you have over your feeling. And to me, that would be the ultimate freedom. It's control over your thoughts, control over how you behave with others. You cannot control how others behave towards you, but you can control how you. And to me, that would be freedom. That would be the biggest.
Yeah, I mean, when I studied the psychology, we talked about people have a strong inner locus of control versus a strong external locus of control, right? And an inner locus is like, I have causality, right? That sense of control that I have. I keep using the word control, but that sense of causality that I have control over, right? That I can make things happen, I can stop things from happening, versus the external locus of control of, you know, the Eeyore like mentality of like, why does everything happen to me, right? Versus when I'm in a box, I can find my way out instead of waiting for somebody else to open up the box to let me out.
That's
you know, and there are things in our life that build up or break down those two variables, for sure.
Thank you.
But the idea is that we have, right, if we can nurture that inner locus, that internal locus of control, that also helps with our sense of agency, right? Our ability to create things or experience things in the way that our mindset allows us to. I mean, the other day I got out of bed and I said to my husband, today's going to be a great day. And he's like, why? So, because I just decided it's going to be, right? And that kind of mentality, you know, even this morning I was feeling this joy and I was like, I don't know why I'm feeling particularly joyful today, but I am, you know, maybe the sun's out. But like that framed my day as I was diving into work and all the other things that I manage. Rick?
Well, I think that what you said is so very appropriate to all of our lives. Basically, I think what we throw out reflects back to us. So if you're going to get up and say, I'm going to have a great, I do that sometimes, this is going to be a great day. and I do my prayers and I go on to work, and sometimes something will happen and go, I said, you know what? That's just okay. Nobody got hurt. Nobody died. Nobody stole anything. And everything is just okay.
Yeah.
And then there seems to be just a nice peace and joy that goes along with that. It's quite amazing.
Yeah. No, it's funny, actually, my now 13-year-old, I used to say to him, like, how was school today? And he'd say, it was good. And I said, what was good about it? He said, well, nobody bit me today. Right. Like that made it a pretty good day. You know, it's when we had those benchmarks for life, like those markers. Well, nobody died and nobody got hurt and nobody stole from me. Today's a pretty good day. You know, what else do I need? You know, and it appears each of us have a roof over our head, right? That's quite a blessing. That's not something to be taken for granted, especially in this day and age.
Well, I'll have to remember that story, that nobody bit me today.
Yeah. Nobody bit me. Tell me.
We live in kind of an embedded life with others, and I think part of freedom, achieving freedom, is freedom from others' lack of freedoms. You know, that the impingement that comes from dealing with people who haven't done any kind of looking at their issues, or who define their life and define by certain kind of exteriority, you know, and then if things are not coming up to measure, that they, you know, they impose their lack of freedom on others.
Yeah.
So dealing with that is a requirement, that we have to free ourselves of others' lack of freedom.
Yeah, I mean, another chapter in that Brene Brown book is about freedom from comparison. Right? Comparison is what limits our creativity. And we say, I'm not good enough. I can't keep up with the neighbors, right? That's kind of where we get stuck. Tommy, go ahead.
The concept of freedom is so big, and I think each of us in our own journey are looking for another freedom. It's none of us have the same thing, you know. It depends whether you are in life and what you are looking for in freedom. So something that doesn't bother one can be another one that wants out of this freedom. And as you say, you can't compare it. Everyone goes his own journey. There are not one journey for all of us. And each of us needs to find the freedom in our own being.
I can't.
So that's what I feel about that, because I'm thinking about how to define freedom. You can't even nearly.
Yeah. I mean, and if you think about even like retirement, right? For some people, retirement's the scariest thing in the world. And for other people, it's saying, I'm free, right? Like I get to spend the time the way I want to. I know my grandparents were like busier in retirement than they were in their working life. Like got tennis and bowling and canasta and bridge and, you know, all those things that you do when you live in Southern Florida. Right. That was their freedom. For some people, like I know when my kids go to sleepaway camp, I have this moment of like, yes. And then I miss them a little bit, right? But like, there's this little bit of like, okay, my schedule's my own right now, right? I'm not bound to anybody else's schedule. But for some people, it's really hard. You know, they'll say like, I just suffer while my kids are away at camp. It's terrible. So we also choose, you know, what I think for everybody, freedom kind of looks different. The way we experience a shift in our schedule and in our lifestyle. Some people don't do well without a routine. That becomes scary to them. That becomes a burden as compared to someone who feels burdened by being stuck in structure.
You know, you could wonder whether the Israelites were truly free until they actually entered the promised land. Because all during those years, people were dying in the desert.
Right. And this generation, that generation that left slavery didn't make it into Israel.
Right, except those who were still like children when they left.
Right. Right. It was the next generation.
Yeah, and when we're talking about being in the moment, there's sort of a lot of parallels here. The 40 years in the desert, and the concept of people dying, death sort of being part of life. How did Shimon HaTzadik know to interpret when he saw this man dressed in black instead of the normal man dressed in white? How did he know to interpret this as a sign that he was going to die that year?
People sort of knows. I mean, they sort of know. I've I have my own experience with death myself, but I had like a near death experience, and when you're there, like I felt this bigger picture of things, and it really felt like there was an order to things. But I fought to come back. I was thinking about what y'all were talking about earlier, but it was like a discussion with God. I was like, okay, I gave in to the fact that I was dying, but I was like, not right now. I'm sorry. And I was really miffed about it, even though I went through the whole body, all my memories leaving me and my everything. But I think that it's given me some kind of energetic connection to death. And it seems like people feel it, like they can really feel something's coming on. They in various different ways, they sort of know. I don't know if that answers your question, but I also wanted to share, just while I'm sitting here, is that the thing I was talking about the Kabbalah yoga is that I was in pain from it for 20 years. And then a friend of mine dragged me to a Kabbalah yoga class. And it was so amazing because when I went to physical therapy, after going to 2 classes, they could tell something was different, and it's the math. That's going to tell you because you're a math person, but it's like so cool because it's like there's something so amazing about the energy of Kabbalah. So I just wanted to share that.
Wait, what were you saying about math and?
Well, Kabbalah is numbers. It's about numbers and energy, and there's just so much to it. But the Kabbalah yoga, I think it's called Nam yoga. They don't do it around here anymore, but it all had to do with like doing things a certain repetition and certain wavelengths were sort of generated, and they could just tell. I didn't say anything. And they were like, what have you been doing for the past 2 weeks? And I was like, whoa, because it's so powerful. So it's pretty cool.
Now, I'm kind of curious. I'm a Christian, and when I've heard of near-death experiences, I've heard of them in terms of Christianity and Christian near-death experiences. What is near-death experience like?
I don't want to get off. I don't want to get off topic about it, but basically, there was a lot of order. Like I felt like it was very peaceful and beautiful, but it was like not my time. But I felt that there was this bigger picture, this order of things that was like everybody sort of has a time, and that I didn't. I mean, if you see that movie, Heaven is for Real. It was very similar to that, except for it was, I'm Jewish, so, but I didn't see Jesus or anything, but I felt myself leaving, and I felt the all connected souls, and it was really beautiful, and I could see what was going on, like the little boy in the movie. It's like I knew everything that was going on, and then I continued to after a while, like I've connected to a lot of energies, and it's kind of weird because I don't know what's exactly it's about, but it's like you just like he knew when he was dying, the little boy in the movie, he could see his parents in one room praying, and one, another, the father, who was a priest, was angry at God, and he was like, it's pretty cool. So I thought that was, whoever said you're like, when you're talking about your son having cancer, it's like part of you is angry, but part of you is saying, there's a bigger plan, and it's an interesting combination of energies, but I'll be glad to talk to you about it some other time more. I don't want to take over the class, but I just thought it was very interesting and so powerful that you could connect, that people think math is separate, but really math and statistics and everything are everywhere. And the math of Kabbalah is just like, whoa.
Have you seen, so just on that note, have you seen the movie Pi?
Oh, Yeah, I haven't seen pi.
There's
I
like,
have to
math
see
is
pi,
everywhere. Math is everywhere. And then he
but
goes
it's really
into gematria.
true. Like
Yeah.
I didn't even, I fought taking statistics for a really long time. And then when I finally took it, I was like, this is amazing because it's really everywhere. But when you look at the numerology, like I was saying about the Kabbalah yoga, like when it hits the body and stuff like that, they could actually tell where we had been working. And it was like, it's pretty cool. There's a lot more going on in the world than you see. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's what we talk about at Kabbalah Experience. We talk about Kabbalah as a study of parallels. Oftentimes Kabbalah is translated as to receive, right? Like Kabbalat Shabbat is receiving the Sabbath, right? The Friday evening service, Friday afternoon service. Or Kabbalat Panim is a ceremony before a wedding. It's like receiving of faces that for the bridal party. But when we're talking about Kabbalah here, we think about Jewish mysticism began well before the term Kabbalah was coined in the 1200s. We teach and we understand that Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism really evolved around the destruction of the temple around 70 CE. And there were great scholarly rabbis that were practicing meditation and mysticism at that time, even though the term Kabbalah wasn't coined. And then when the Kabbalists came back to look at the word Kabbalah, they said, well, where did this even come from? And looked into the Torah, looked into the Bible text, and found it in the Torah, found it in the Bible. How many times, for those of you that haven't taken the class with me, how many times do you think the word Kabbalah or the root for Kabbalah shows up in the Torah, in the Bible? A lot, a little?
A lot.
I would say a lot.
I would say a lot.
So what's interesting is the root for Kabbalah, right? Kabel, is only in the Torah once.
Oh my.
In Makbilot, when they're talking about the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle, it says that the rings should face each other like two sisters. I'll get the text up on the screen for you. So what they found that the rings of the ark, so if you picture like shower curtains, the rings of shower curtains, they face each other like the loops face each other like two sisters face each other. And it's a really interesting term. It's Isha al-Achot, right? How a woman faces her sister. And I actually started doing some research into, well, where else is that verse used? How is it explained? Or how is it translated? Because whenever we look in the Chumash, in the Torah, and in its translations, we never see a direct translation of that. So I'm kind of wondering why not, and where else do we see it? So we do see it quite a bit in the description of the building of the temple, of the Mishkan, of the ark that we used traveling through the desert. It's about how the floorboards are lined up, how like different things are aligned right next to each other, but it's never directly translated as a woman faces her sister, even though that's the literal translation of the words. The only other time we see this phrase, and I'm just trying to pull it up here for you, because I know it's good to get to the text. Here, it's in Exodus 26:5. And I'll share my screen. The only other time we see this phrase of Isha al-Achuta, right, like a woman to her sister, we see it in Leviticus when we talk about that a man shouldn't lie with his wife's sister. That's the only time I could find it. So there's a really cool website called Sefaria, and you could like look up a verse and see what sources are on it. But this Isha al-Achuta is really interesting to me because I don't find it anywhere translated directly. So the text is that you put 50 loops on the first curtain and 50 loops on the end of the curtain. That's on the second set, and the loops run parallel to one another as a woman faces her sister. And I have that in bold here in Hebrew, Makbilot, right? So we talk about Kabbalah, the way we teach Kabbalah at Kabbalah Experience is about the study of parallels. The parallels between seen and unseen reality, the parallels between physical and spiritual reality, the parallels between the finite and the infinite, right? How does the finite, like a chessboard, right, holds infinite possibility? Like there's almost an infinite number of games of chess, right? How does our physical body hold infinite love, infinite light, energy, soul, right? And that's also when we start talking about the light and darkness, with Hurricane Reuben Carter, who was a prisoner, or Joseph in the story in the Bible, that how do prisoners, right, find light and darkness? How do we find, how do we see light, right? We could only see light when there's shadows. We can only see light when there's separation, right? Like, we're all sitting in rooms that have light, but you don't see it unless it's differentiated from the darkness. Looking at like the blinds behind Tommy, we see the light more clearly because there's darkness separating them, right? When we hold up our hands to the Havdalah flame, Havdalah is a ceremony that separates Shabbat from the rest of the week. We say a blessing for about Aish, about the fire, the flame, and we hold up our fingers. The custom is to hold up your fingers like this, almost so you're separating the light from the darkness, like Shabbat from the rest of the week, right? We don't have that holiness. It's harder to see the holiness if we don't have the mundane. We can't live in the place of light and awe all the time because we won't see it. We won't recognize it.
It's interesting. We got to parallels and the Mishkan, those first 40 years, because just like there was a first 40 years, there was also a last 40 years, and today happens to be Yoma 39. I looked it up. It's the one where that talks about the last 40 years before the destruction of the temple, where the scarlet thread did not turn white to symbolize forgiveness of sins, and where the lot, we're talking about choosing the lot for the Lord, did not show up in the right hand of the high priest at all during those 40 years. So that's about a 1 in a trillion probability.
So you're talking about
this is on the daf for the day, apparently, Yoma 39. And it only comes up like once every 7 and something years.
Interesting.
And it's interesting because I see the 40 years before the destruction of the temple, roughly 40 years before the temple was destroyed, was about when Jesus began his ministry.
Right, around the turn of the century.
And so around like 30 or so AD, because 40 years before 70. But I see that as saying, as a Christian, I see that as saying that now our forgiveness is through Yeshua, through Jesus, rather than through the Yom Kippur of the temple.
In your theology, yeah.
But we get that out of the Talmud, which is cool.
Right, yeah, because we all share the same sources. I mean, when you ask about death for a Jew versus death for a Christian, we all have the human experience, right? We're all coming from the same place. We're all coming from the same ore of creation. It's just we carry different theologies and practices. And, I would say, just for everybody's sake here, that at Kabbalah Experience, we don't expect folks to come in with Jewish knowledge or Hebrew reading or a certain experience in Judaism. We really do encourage diversity and inclusivity and bringing, welcoming our friends and brethren who come from different religious practices and gender identities and cultural backgrounds. Like we're all one, right? We all.
It helps you find parallels.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you. We just have a few minutes left. I'm wondering if there's any hanging questions, reflections that are jumping out for you at this time.
I was going to comment on what I think you were just saying before. I'm sorry my phone kept dying, but I hope I can recapture what y'all said before because I was very interesting. I wrote a poem about Sukkot because we had a talk in our sukkah one time about that it was and there was somebody in the sukkah who had just lost their son to an overdose. And it was about how there's so much light that the sukkah it gives us a boundary to it's sort of like death, like sukkah shows that there's like an end and then makes the rest of it comprehensible that there's an end. And I thought that was interesting what you said about the light and the dark, because it's true. We don't even know that there's light unless we have the contrast. And I've always been fascinated by the thing with the hands. I just didn't know what that was, like why we look at our nails and stuff like that. But it's like the holiness of the Shabbat is ending and then we're going back to the mundane.
Yeah, Yeah, I think there's a lot of different explanations. I worked with a rabbi once who talked about when you hold your fingers up, you should look at it like the flame is coming out of them. So it's almost like how our prayers go up to the heavens. I like to look at it as a separation between light and darkness, between Shabbat and the rest of the week, the holy and the mundane. What do you see, Rabbi Buzz? How do you interpret it?
I see, this was an amazing moment because even through the stories of the individuals and the way it has been shared in the last hour, was representative of the transformational yet mystical experience that brought about the necessary transformation.
Mm.
If you look deeply, there was an instant where a change was necessary. It took place. Joan said, "This is not my time," but the instant was she saw it as her time and confronted it with transformational strength. Not everybody could do that. And, there are the different views of those who shared today show a transformational essence. I've always got to bring everything into a bouquet, which, you can hold in your hand. Because you keep using the word Kabbalah as a transformational experience.
Yeah.
And, transformational from what? Freedom from what? What are we looking to transform to, and how to do it?
Yeah.
And I could throw the boomerang back at you and say, is there a principle of freedom in Kabbalistic interpretation which you can't share at the moment? I mean, is there one?
I think in Kabbalah, if I was teaching, this could be a whole semester, right? But like, what is freedom in Kabbalah? I think freedom is a sense of control. I think, what we were getting at this whole time, freedom, having a sense of control of our masks, control of our narratives, control of what we want to manifest in our lives. A sense of self-determination. When we talk about like our past, our present, and our future, do we have free will and control over our destiny? To me, that's my personal understanding. I haven't really delved into what the Kabbalists say about freedom. But that's kind of where I go with it.
I think the ultimate freedom is the very essence of energy. That energy is not containable. And so the flow of energy in and out of this corporeal life, which tries to contain it, creates a certain amount of fallacy in our life. And our bodies are constantly transforming. Our cells are constantly turning over. And so that sort of incontainability of energy is to me ultimate freedom.
Yeah, you might also, and I'm just putting in the chat here, we're offering free intro classes at the end of June, and here's a link to register. And I'll get these up on my Jewish Learning. I just updated the website today. All right, if we talk about the story of creation as or, right? When God said, Vayahi or, let there be light, right? The question that the Kabbalah said is, what is that light, right? The light is in the sun and the stars and the celestial beings. Those were created on day 4. So what's this primordial light energy from day 1? So the way that the Kabbalist that Isaac Luria Ha'ari, right, talked about was this idea that, God contracted into God's self in order to create the space for creation to occur, for physical creation to occur. And this or energy was this light in these vessels, and the vessels shattered, right? And our job in this world is the idea of tikkun, of repairing the world, of putting these vessels back together, pulling the shards of light, connecting the shards of light when we connect with other human beings. And if we think about, right, that our physical bodies, right, and when we talk about Adam and Eve, I'm like jumping all over the place, but When Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, they were given coat note or, garments of skin, and it's or with an ayin instead of or with an aleph. So it sounds the same, but they're two different things, right? The or light energy versus the or physical skin. That or, right, with the aleph that's inside of each of us, transcends time, transcends space, right? So that even if our physical bodies give way, right, that light energy of each of us continues, in my opinion, right? And the idea that when someone dies, right, the evidence of that is that we can still love them, right? We're still connected to people whose lives have ended before ours. We'll always feel connected to them. And that's that or in the world. So if we think about the idea of reincarnation, right, or our souls coming back in different bodies, or in different ways, right? If matter and light and energy are neither created nor destroyed, they just come back in different forms. They just exist in different forms. That, like, my Diet Coke, right, comes from energy that was here from the beginning of time, right? My desk comes from the energy that was the beginning of time. My light energy inside of me comes from the energy from the beginning of time. That Vayahi or, let there be light. So then that ties us to that sense, right, of timelessness. Right, that we're just finite beings in an infinite world. We're just here on a blip of time, but time is eternal. Time came way before us, and time is going to go way beyond us. So while our physical bodies might be limited in time, our or, right, the energy that we manifest is continuing. It's timeless. So that's what I've got for today. I love talking with you guys, and I love where this conversation went. I really do welcome you to Kabbalah Experience and invite you. Please check out our free classes. We're just up to, I mean, now not many of you are local, but we're going to be reopening our building for in-person classes this summer, but we're always going to continue offering what we do on Zoom. So I haven't quite finished refining our policies on reopening, but know that that's in process, and that'll be up on our website shortly. But in the meantime, if you're interested in joining us on Zoom, you could feel free to start registering. Yeah.
Where
Thank you
in
very much.
Colorado are you?
Denver. Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Until next
Appreciate it.
time. Thank you.
Until next week.
Joan?
Thank you.
Joan, can you still hear me? Hello?